Welcome, Healed community. Welcome to episode 5, another case study where we delve into a case that is happening in South Africa at this time. We're talking about the devastating story of Likhona Fose. She's a 14-year-old that went missing in her community, and after some time searching by the community, she was found mutilated. So a very brutal case, very sad case where a young female has lost her life. And that is what we're talking about. This case takes place in Roodepoort, Durban, deep west of Johannesburg. So as always, we aim to shed a light on sexually motivated crime, ways in awareness around the community, some of the dynamics around these cases, so that we can hopefully build a community that is safer, so we can be more aware of some of the red flags, the situations we find ourselves in, and how we can keep our children and ourselves safer. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Thank you, Ruth. We're handing over to you.
Thank you, Ella. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. We are here to educate and empower and create awareness, like Ella said. And just before we get into the timeline of this absolutely devastating case, I just want to say that gender-based violence is on the rise worldwide. And we just recently spoke about Olarato's case, and not even a week later, this incident occurred. And I've lost time on how many times we've seen justice for Twigwe, justice for Olarato, justice for Jaden. So now more than ever, we need our voices to speak up against these injustices on women and particularly children. We need our voice to help those who can't voice the abuse, our children. So if you have any information on crimes that are happening, please speak up so that we can be part of this healing and part of the change. And we welcome you to leave any comments that you have on the discussion here today. Like we said, this is an ongoing case, so we're going to be discussing a bit of the timeline. So let's start with that. So on June 1st, 2025, Likhona Fose was playing with her friends when she disappeared. She did not return home, and her family immediately began searching. And she was only reported missing the following day at the South African Police Services. Then a day later, on June the 2nd, a mutilated body was discovered by a passerby in a field in Durban Deep in Roodepoort, Snubs west of Johannesburg. So the reports confirmed that parts of Likhona's body were missing, including her genitals, her knees, a part of her nose, and this raised suspicions that this might be a ritualistic killing. So what we do know is that the South African Police Services Occult unit joined the investigation right away, just to ascertain whether this was a hate-driven motive or whether this occurred for ritualistic purposes. Now, 2 boys in the community came forward to identify the friends Likhona was last seen with. We know that. And after this happened, the secondary school where Likhona was at, they received counseling and support for the learners and the teachers. So there was a countrywide plea from the South African Police Services which went out via the SABC, which is the South African Broadcasting Corporation, and other platforms, just to ask the public for any information that could assist with the arrest of the murders. And then on information gathered, the SAPS didn't divulge how the information was received, but then this led to the arrest of a 39-year-old male suspect, later identified as Trevor Menzie. He was taken in for questioning by the SAPS Occult unit due to the nature of the crime. So, fast forward to June the 11th, Trevor appeared in the Roodepoort Magistrates Court. The state then opposed bail, citing the brutality of the crime. But here's where it gets interesting. Trevor Menzies had a criminal history. He was convicted in 2007 for attempted murder and armed robbery, and was out on parole at the time of Likhona's unfortunate death. And the case was postponed to the 18th of June, which is in a few hours, for a formal bail hearing. That all happened on Wednesday, the 11th of June. Then on Thursday, the 12th of June, a second suspect, a Pakistani shop owner, was arrested. This arrest is due to some community tip-offs and leads from Trevor's questioning. And this shop owner, his shop was looted by locals following the news of his arrest. And then last Friday the 13th of June, authorities, including Johannesburg Public Safety MCC SWACU, clarified that no confirmed evidence yet links the shopkeeper directly to the crime, but they were looking into it. And the investigations there are ongoing. So that is the timeline of the events. Like Edith said, this was a very brutal case. Certain parts of this child's body was removed, and the purpose for that is not yet known. The case is still ongoing, and so is the trial. But what I saw here from this case, and I just wanted to start the South African Police Services immediately reacted to this case. So they immediately assigned their Special Services Occult unit due to the nature of this case and the mutilation of the body. So, like I said, it's unclear what the motive for the killing was, whether it was ritualistic. And the first key point that I want to bring up is that this person was on parole at the time of this child's death. So I'm not sure what exactly the system does in terms of parolees, whether there's a process in South Africa. But what are your thoughts on the happenings here?
Ruth, when did you say he went into prison? Was it 2007?
Yes, so he was convicted in 2007 for attempted murder and armed robbery. And he was out of parole. They didn't give information. I tried looking for that in terms of when he was released, but he was out on parole at the time of Likhona's death.
So he spent a long time. It seems as though he spent a long time because parole. How long does parole usually? Parole is not years, right? You have a parole period.
Correct.
To make sure that where you're supposed to check in and you showing that you're behaving and all of that. To my knowledge, you're not usually on parole for years. So that means he came out of prison recently. So he was in jail for a long time, this man. And you said it was for attempted murder and?
Robbery.
Robbery, okay. So, I would be so curious to know because it seems like a long time, and we know in South Africa you don't go to jail for long for many things. So it must have been quite brutal. Or it must have been quite serious for him to have been in prison for so long. I'm just assuming, because obviously we don't have the details. Okay. And then, when I looked at this precious child's face, she's so little. She's so little. We don't know what motivated it, but I heard that the community had already been protesting and reaching out to authorities to assist because apparently the crime is quite bad in that area. It is known for its violent crime, and so there have been other cases that have motivated the community to sort of start speaking out and asking for help and for assistance, and that could be why there was such a quick response from the police, possibly, or either way, it's good that they did. Please just repeat to me which body parts were removed.
So let me just go back. So it was the nose, the knees, her genitals. Yeah, that was all that was mentioned. And they are wondering whether this was a ritualistic, motivated killing.
Yes. So I find it really interesting that occult is so, there are so many crimes related to the occult in South Africa that we even have an occult unit. It's very interesting. We do know, of course, what is known as witchcraft in this country practiced, but all across Africa, to the extent that I know a lot of, well, they call it witchcraft, and then there's traditional healing, and they would use roots and like medicine, natural ingredients for their mutis and stuff. But I also had no idea that we had an occult unit, that it was to the extent that it was. I mean, it's spoken all the time, where there are occult practitioners or practitioners of witchcraft that will use body parts. Any sexual motivation in this case, with the genitals being removed as well. Like, I mean, they don't really know. What do you think, Ruth? Is there a possibility that this is just a serial killer? Or does it seem quite deliberate with the specific body parts that were taken? And how can you imagine, what would you think would be the shop owner's role in this? And involvement? Is it possible? Because he must have spoken. He admitted. I heard that he admitted. He confessed. Am I correct in that? I heard, and that says there, and he must have told them something that's piqued their interest. Apparently, she used to hang out at that tuck shop with her friends on a regular basis too.
That is alleged.
So,
I'm not sure about whether she hung out at the tuck shop or not, but we can definitely not rule out the sexual motive in the killing of Likhona. But I do want to say that it's alleged that the shop owner had something to do with it. You know, her genitals were removed along with the tips of her nose and parts of her knees. So for me, that doesn't suggest any sort of sexual mutilation. And we don't know, there's been nothing in reports of any sort of sexual assault, other than the fact that we know certain body parts were removed. And as the report stated, and all the newspaper reports that I looked at, forensic testing, including rape kits and DNA analysis, was not completed at the time of the reports that I read, and it has not been released to the public. So this could be something that could have occurred, but it's not been released to the public yet. Regarding the South African Police Services, I also did not know that they had an occult unit, and so I went to go do some research on that. And this has actually been around since 1992. So just at the end of the apartheid era, this was established by the former government. And the SAPS, South African Police Services, they brought in this occult-related unit because they had suspicions that this might be a ritualistic killing, or what is known as a muti killing. And I know with another case that was present in South Africa. I think her name was Jocelyn, where a little girl went missing. There was also mention of the same unit that was assigned there. So I know when there's a suspicion of certain multi killings, then that SAPS related crimes unit comes to the fore. But whether this is a sexually motivated or a ritualistic killing, I think that is a question that's going to come out as the trial goes on, because it is unclear at the moment. So it could be either or. I did read that she was partially dressed, so this could raise some red flags. Certain parts of her clothing was removed, but again, it's not clear at the moment whether this was ritualistic or whether it was a killing of a sexual nature.
Or if it's just someone who is sadistic and enjoys murdering.
So I just wanted to jump in.
Some people also take trophies. They have a specific way in which they would do things. Also, is it possible that someone paid for this to happen for some reason, to quiet her and to make it look like a ritualistic killing? Because in the case of Jocelyn Smith, that is what they told the police to just to send them on a wild goose chase.
Exactly.
Because just like there are so many white, there are cases where men, husbands and wives get rid of their partners, and then they'll say it's a racially motivated murder. They'll say they were attacked by black people who tried to rob them, or just attack them because they hate them, because of the stories that go around where people are spreading misinformation and creating a lot of hype around this idea that there is this targeting of the murder of white people at the hands of black people as a result of hatred because of equality and apartheid. And it is misinformation. It is not specifically racially motivated. There might obviously be some cases of that, but it is not as predominant. It is not the overall norm. And is it possible with the stories that go around the occult, and that babies are taken, children are taken for their body parts, for muti and occult practices, that some people might use that as as a escape, or as that people would do that specifically to make it look someone might be committing the crime for another reason, but make it look specifically like it could be, just to deter the police, or to create some sort of confusion. Is that possible? Because I would be curious to know what the statistics are on cases that are actually convicted where it is proven. Like, I'd be curious to know what the statistics are of cases committed for occult purposes.
We might drop it in the comments if we look into that a little bit later, but that is definitely an interesting question. I know that for Likhona there was a discussion around within the community, could this be a hate crime? Because it is alleged that she was openly lesbian. That was her orientation. And there was questions around whether this could be a hate crime. So there's three sort of questions around the investigative status, if it was a ritualistic killing, hate crime, or whether this was sexual abuse. I read in just one area that she was lesbian, and the tuck shop owner is being questioned around that, whether he had any hate towards her. I read that, but this is all just news reports that came out, and I think we are going to be seeing a little bit more of this in the upcoming days. But the way in which her body was found, it says here that her parents were definitely multiple people, those that found her, received counseling, people at the school, which is a great thing. Her teachers got counseling, those who were at school with her got counseling, and then obviously her family as well.
Yeah, certainly something very sinister going on. If it is a cult motivated crime, practitioners, it is possible that someone asked for a very specific type of person, asked for someone perhaps who was lesbian. That's a possibility. It depends on what the motive would be used for and so forth. I'm just wondering, like, how realistic is this? I've heard of many people, um, spiritual healers and traditional healers and practitioners coming under terrible violence in the community because they're accused of things. I just wonder how true it is. Sometimes I think it can just be a scapegoat because people don't know too much about it. They just hear stories, and these stories can be embellished and demonized. People who practice the occult are not murderers, not really. I'm just saying because I'm a spiritual healer, a spiritual practitioner. I I use a lot of natural medicine. I practice what some would consider witchcraft, and um, it's not what has been taught. And I think because these practices have been so demonized, it's really easy to pin it on, just like with the witch trials. So many crimes were pinned on these women just because they were an easy scapegoat, and people can be so gullible. But I'm really curious about this department in the police, and what really is going on in that world. Maybe we can delve into that at some point. But because this is an ongoing, I mean, this is happening in the courts right now. Obviously, not much of the information is going to be given to the public, especially if it's going to affect the case. Do you think that this will be a public trial, like in the event of Amber? You
I
wonder.
definitely think it has all the elements of a public case because the community was involved from the get-go. There's a lot of response from the community, really passionate, because there's been pleas prior to Likhona's passing for the police to step in. There were other cases as well where people were being murdered, and unfortunately this case got the attention. There was pleas from the community, please can we have more police around the area. I don't know the area personally, but according to the locals, it's a very dangerous area. I like what you said, Elif, about healers, who I'm not sure how they refer to in South Africa, but I like what you said about the truth about natural medicine versus these multi killings. It lies in the understanding between the distinction of traditional healing and the criminal misuse of spiritual beliefs. I think there's a clear distinction. They're definitely not the same. In Likhona's case, I can't wait to see what the actual motive was. Speaking about the South African police services and that occult, they have actually presented in some other cases. In some of them that I read, there was at least 4 cases that I read on where they looked into rare ritual murders, especially in rural areas, as where most of these cases presented itself. So this is not something new, but it is definitely interesting to read about. And I was reading about a 10-year-old girl who was dismembered in Soshanguve, which is near Pretoria, and practicing Sangoma, and other suspects were arrested. It's not clear what happened to that case, but they were allegedly making muti or medicine, and body parts similar to Likhona's in this case were removed, like the genitals, some of the fingers were removed, etc. And that victim's name was Masecha Komoko. Please go and look it up. So that happened in 2009. So this occult services within the police has been around for a while, and they look at these specific cases which are related to ritualistic killings.
Yeah, it's a pity that we don't find out what really happens in the end, like where it goes, like, that not enough information is shared so that we can start to have some light shed, because certainly I'm not saying these practices don't happen. There is always a misuse of everything. There's a misuse of power, there's a misuse of influence, and when you have a whole lot of people that are desperate to get out of a situation, and some of them think the only way to do it is through witchcraft, then naturally that's going to happen. But I'm also thinking about the events where you have these people already living in poverty in these communities where that is the only home they have. They can't go anywhere else. It's not the kind of situation where if you don't like what's going on, you can go overseas, right? This is predominantly in the Black communities. They're already impoverished. There is a lot of ignorance, I think, and just outdated traditional beliefs, and a lack of awareness, where our idea of what's happening is sometimes distorted. It's not, we don't know the real thing that's going on. So now you have these people in these communities who want to do good. They want to practice their ancient craft and medicines and spiritual practices, and the community goes to them for help. But then they also are in a vulnerable position to be targeted or a scapegoat in the event of something negative happening. And their houses get burned, they get burnt in streets, and because they've got nowhere to go. So it is a pity that not more awareness is. A case will be opened, there will be suspicions, but they don't clarify it, what really happened. I think that's such a pity. Like you say with Jocelyn Smith, that was just something they made up. They've never really admitted to what was going on. The only thing they know is that they have footage of them getting into that white vehicle, not going to. There's no exchange between them and a Sangoma. Nobody's seen them actually take the child there. It was just talks. It's things they were saying. And people will latch onto that kind of thing. The community, I know in that case, also went to protest around that person's house and stuff. Imagine how frightening that is. So it would be nice if more information about these things, if there was more, if it was more open for us to actually know what's going on. So I do hope in this case with Likhona that her case is public so that we are given updates as to what's happening. I watched him in court. He seems very blank, and it could very possibly be because he is a sociopath and is able to murder and just totally disassociate from, totally detached from it. There could be more to the story, but you say that there was no rape kits. They didn't look.
Not at the time that this was published, so they could have been processed as we speak. I'm sure that's going to come out as the case unfolds. But there has been talks that allegedly the shop owner ordered a hit because she was, like I said, she was a lesbian, and that is still to be seen. So I'm definitely interested, if this was a hate crime, why would someone go to the lengths that they did? Because like you mentioned, she was such a little girl. I looked at her in relation to her other peers at school, and she was tiny. So that really begs the question to why allegedly someone would go to that length to order the murder of a young 14-year-old little girl. And it seems interesting that you say that, the lack of emotion on the alleged killer's face. Because when we spoke about Amber as well, just a couple of weeks ago, there was also a definite lack of emotion from her. I don't know if you remember that, Ella.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
But there was emotion. It was just of a different kind. She was
Mm.
very close to the to the victim. You could see that, and it was very personal. If she did
Mm.
this, it was very personal. With him,
You seem
he's
very
so
detailed.
detached from it.
Yeah,
It's as if it was just another job.
yeah.
So I would be surprised if someone did paying to do this, whether it was for occult practices, whether it was a hate crime because she was gay,
Mm.
and as I've mentioned, in some of our communities, there's a lot of ignorance, and there's not a lot of you're sort of demonized, and there's not a lot of support when you identify as different, especially when it comes to your sexuality. Uh, but the way that he was, and considering the fact that he confessed, he's definitely sociopathic, a psychopath, because
Yeah,
it was just like he was he was at a job interview or something.
yeah.
It was
He
just sort of,
definitely was so detached with his first appearance in court. And I think that the next one is actually scheduled for today, the 18th of June. So I'm definitely
mhm.
going to be watching out for that, just to see what comes of that. Um,
You know, sorry, Ruth.
oh,
This just makes this just makes me think of something that happened in my community when I was a young girl, and it was actually I actually had a I had an uh, paranormal experience around this. There was this family that was brutally murdered in their home, just around the corner from where I was staying.
mm,
I was quite a big kid growing up in Mitchell's Plain, where the wife was a nurse and she worked night shift, and the husband would stay, obviously, at home with the kids, with the little girl and boy. And when he was home, he would take a walk to the shebeen that was not far. It was just around the corner, get one or two beers, and he'd chill at home for the evening. So that's what he did. He went to the shebeen. It was a local shebeen there, and went to go and get a few beers. And he bumped into an old friend,
mm,
and they started chatting.
mm,
And the old friend was accompanied by someone else who we didn't know. But you know how we are. If I meet you and you with someone else, I'm just going to expect that it's someone I can trust.
yeah.
And so they were chatting, and the conversation went on so long that they started to have probably one or two glasses. He was like, "Hey, I can't stick around. I've got to go because my kids are at home."
Mm,
And he said to him, "But you can come and hang out with me over there if you want." So the friend went home with him to go and chill and have a few beers at home where his kids were, and brought his friend along. What he didn't know was this was someone who was out on parole, also for murder.
mm,
And so the night went on, and two beers became more and more, because that's how it goes. Oh no, we'll go get more, whatever. Everything's cool. We're chilling. Somewhere along during the evening, he fell asleep. The kids were already put to bed in their bedrooms. He fell asleep, and this man slit his throat
wow.
on the sofa on the couch in the dining room lounge area, and then went to the rooms and mutilated the children.
Wow.
And then they left, locked the door. And so when the wife came home, no one answered, and she naturally became alarmed. She became alarmed by that. Knock, 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 went across the road to neighbors. You know how it is in our communities. The neighbor, it's so close, the houses are close together. What's going on? Did you see my husband? No, he's not opening. No, nothing. The neighbors didn't know what was going on. She went back, decided to peep through the hole in the door, and she could see red on the wall, like something was wrong. And she
Yeah.
called the police. And so they found this horrific scene with blood everywhere. And the children had been murdered and gutted and mutilated, both the little girl and boy. And us as children, we were curious. The whole house was cordoned off, and we went there. And I saw his apparition. I saw his ghost. he was very panicked that there was children around the house, obviously feeling it's a dangerous place, saying we have to leave, like wanting to protect us. And so because I had that experience, that paranormal experience, I don't forget it. That case is quite fresh in my mind. That was, I mean, some people are just sadistic like that. Some people enjoy killing. And so I don't know what happened with this case, if they ever found out what motivated it. And it is a pity because that's the kind of information that should spread awareness. Why do people do these things?
Mm.
It's sort of it makes, I don't know, it's making me think of that for some reason. It's quite specific. Did they reveal her cause of death, Ruth? Likhona's cause of death. They didn't.
No.
So the autopsy doesn't know what a cause of death is, and I think that's important. How
Mm.
she died is important.
I think those
You
details
know.
will definitely come out as the case goes on. That's why I'm so interested to see in what's going to be happening over the next couple of weeks. And just to understand whether this was an actual murder, was it a sexual assault that went wrong, but what was the motivation there? I think that's going to be the details that are going to come out is going to be really key in understanding why this happened. Because there's, like you said, there's the killing of someone, but then to further dehumanize the body by doing that, by cutting off the nose, by getting rid of certain parts of the body, it raises major questions as to why this happened. Because for someone to do that, I would think you don't even see this person as a human being. You would have to see them as an object. And like you said, totally disassociate from
Yeah.
the situation.
Serial killers often do that because to them it's like a sport. So you're not. But also remember when we did the case study. No, I don't know if it was a case study you and I did or one that I just watched on my own, where there is this sense of I think it was an interview I listened to on my own, and this pedophile was explaining to the psychologist that they're just objects.
Mm.
They're objects. They don't feel like, oh, this is a child or this is a person. They're an object. And they're there for my pleasure. So with serial killers, I think very often it is like that. You're just this thing that they want to explore, they're curious about, or they want to own. That's why they keep trinkets and they keep souvenirs.
Yeah.
So that psychology is quite interesting. And certainly in this case that I was telling you about when I was little, that was not pre-planned. That man didn't know he was going to go there. It was totally random. It was just opportunistic. But he obviously wanted to get to the kids because he slit the father's throat. He made sure that he was taken out. And when I saw his apparition, when I saw that his ghost, he did have his neck cut.
Mm.
And I
did they
didn't
ever
know
find the man who did it?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know. They must have. If they knew that he was someone that was out on parole, they must have found him. But the details, why he did it, what his psychology is, and all of that.
That case does definitely
Yeah.
ring a bell, but I also, it's very vague, sort of, because there's quite a few cases that happened in Mitchell's Brain. You talk about the psyche of a perpetrator. If this was and I'm just playing devil's advocate, I'm not saying it is, but if this was a murder motivated by a hate crime, for example, then I don't know how the shop owner plays into it. Like I said, guys, we have limited details, but when we look at this, for example, in ritual killings, murder is seen as a means to gain power or appease spirits or whatever that person beliefs are. But with homophobic hate crimes, the violence is sometimes framed as correcting or punishing. And it's going to be interesting to see what the relationship was, because I did read somewhere that, or you said earlier, she was also frequently at the shop. So whether this was a hate crime or it was a sexual crime, I cannot wait for the details. And like I said, guys, if we are missing anything, write it in the comments. Do let us know if you have heard anything or read anything about this case. It would be really interesting to know.
Yeah, it's sad. It's so scary that some people are so vulnerable to these types, to these types of things. Like, how does this happen? How can a young girl not just live her life and be safe in her community and in her streets? And obviously, she's not the first one. Um, crime is just getting worse by the minute in this country, and there's so many reasons. Like, someone's life means nothing. It really
Yeah.
means nothing. So yeah, we look forward to see what the details are and to hopefully see justice for this precious girl. But I don't think anything.
And this crime specifically has left a lot of people traumatized because of what they saw, what they experienced. And I'm so happy that they did get some counseling to help them heal. Just from this case alone, Ela, what do you think we can do in identifying perpetrators? I know it's a long shot, but what is it that we can, like, this guy was out on parole. He obviously had, a past. The guy from Mitchell's Plain was out on parole as well. How can we advocate for stricter enforcement of crimes of this nature, hate-related crimes, sexual crimes?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I think our system, there's so much that can be amended in our system. Usually when you go out on parole, I would think that you're going to make sure that this person is going out into a life that actually gives them a fighting chance. If it's easier for you to be in jail than to be out here, then if someone can just offer you money to commit a crime, and the motivation to do that is so easy because life out here is so hard. If it's difficult for children, if life in these communities for children are hard, are dangerous, like our streets, our communities need to be cleaned up. Our communities are still reeling in the systematic inequality and injustice post our freedom, so a lot more resources need to go into how we make our communities safer. And when somebody is in prison, are we set up in our prisons for recovery, for empowerment? Like, what is put in place there, and what motivates letting someone back out onto the street? And do we just let them out onto the street and forget about them until we're called in because a crime's been committed?
Yeah.
What is the process? Should they go, and should it depend on the type of crime that's been committed? Should they go, if they're out on parole, into a program where they've got to check in at a certain time, and there are actual managements in place and people overseeing their behavior? Is the community notified that a criminal is being let out into your community? Be vigilant. If anything happens, this is the number you call. Is the police response good? Why?
Yeah.
Because obviously people have been asking for help and protesting. So this crime is an issue. Now there is this horrific incident, and obviously criminals are going to target the vulnerable. Criminals are going to target the vulnerable. So
there was another case, I think it was in May. It involved a 9-year-old girl, and I think it was in Hanover Park, Don't quote me on this, guys, but
It is Hanover Park, yes. It is
yeah.
Hanover Park. It's the
So
case that, yeah.
this girl was sent to go and buy something, and there was also someone out on parole, and she ended up in the home of a convicted pedophile. And the community also absolutely in uproar about this. They were very passionate about getting her out of there and saying, you know, how could this have been prevented? So if you guys
And it happened. Well, oh my gosh, Ruth, can we just talk about this for a moment? When I was a little girl growing up, my mother couldn't take care of me. My mother was a struggling alcoholic. So I was free to do my own thing. I was so normal in the community I grew up in that young kids would roam around all day long doing their own thing to their own devices, and the neighbors could call me and ask me to go to the shop and do this for me and do that for me. That is not normal. That is not okay anymore. You're living in Hanover Park, where there is often gang rivalry and shootings. And yes, it is sad that we've got so much crime in our communities. It is sad that we've got all of this gang violence, and that if you want your child to be safe, they've got to be indoors, or you've got to take them out of the community. But when you know you're living in a war zone, how do you send a 9-year-old girl to the shop for milk on her own? Like, I know that's normal in these communities. It's certainly the way I grew up, but I mean, something's got to change, man. Like, she's going to the shop, and I heard the one woman saying in an interview, she was such a good girl. If an adult asked her to do so, this is what we talk about in the course in recovery. We talk about what we normalize around our children, and we don't. We teach them, don't ask questions. That's exactly what the woman said. She won't ask questions. She'll just do what he says because he's an adult. Well, that's the problem. The problem is, why don't you walk to the shop with your child? Why are you sending a 9-year-old to the shop? Why don't you get up as an adult and go to the shop for the bread? Walk to the shop with them. Where are you? And people don't want to hear that. People don't want to hear that, but it's our responsibility to protect our children.
And this is possibly measures like those that can be taken to keep our children safe. Here in New Zealand, we have a rule, and if the child's under 14, they cannot be left unsupervised. As a parent, you can get locked up if your child is unsupervised at any time.
It's neglect. Just because everybody's doing it doesn't mean it's not neglect. And whether people like that I'm saying this or not, I'm not taking away from the fact that somebody's done something horrible. This is a pedophile that was let out. When we don't have anything in place to actually be educated or to know if anyone can you recover from that behavior? No, that is why we do these case studies where we delve into discussing the mind of the pedophile. It is, what did you say the last time? It's a sexual orientation, and when it's accompanied with deviant behavior, they act on it. So, as a woman, are you ever not going to want to be intimate with a man? If you're attracted to men, let's be honest, that's sometimes you're going to make compromising, you're going to feel really, really desperate with your urges. If you're a man, same thing, right? You behave in a healthy way because you're healthy. But if you have these tendencies and you have deviancies and you are unhealthy, there is no program to assess like what's going on. Why do you let these people out again? And if we can't let them out of prison, what do we do with them? I think we're so far off from even we're not having the right conversations. So the thing is, why did they let this person into the community? Hello? There are a lot of pedophiles in our communities. Just because they haven't been convicted doesn't mean that they are not there. So therefore, do not treat your children like slaves to be running to the shops back and forth for you and your neighbors, because that makes a good child. She's such a good child. She would do anything that an adult says. No, that doesn't make her a good child. That makes her neglected.
And that's exactly the sort of behavior that the perpetrators look for. that vulnerability, that not questioning, that's the perfect way in for a perpetrator, then for that vulnerability. Just like we saw in a previous case where there was a family unit that was weakened because of different circumstances. Perpetrators have different things that they look for. Like this child who said she wasn't going to question anything, she was just, she does as she's told, which is really, really unfortunate for her.
She's in a war zone. She's in an area where all sorts of crimes happen all the time. When I was growing up too, there was a whole lot of kids. The houses are small. There's so much going on. The children are all playing. Most of the kids are doing their own thing just to be able to play and enjoy themselves. So you can easily disappear. You can easily go missing. Those areas are busy. It's busy. And it's so normal. There are certain things that are normalized that people don't want to acknowledge is neglect. But it is neglect. It is neglect when you are sending your child, even if it's in a quiet area, when you're sending your child to the shop where you can't see them, that is neglect, and that is putting them in danger. So the response is angry towards this man. He's a predator. And if you knew that he was there, were you all going to keep your children inside? Then you must do that anyway, because let me tell you something, people. They are everywhere. They are everywhere. And most of them, they slip under the radar. The police don't even pick up. They get away with what they're doing for years because there's so many things in place in our system that makes it easy. In our communities, in our households that make it easy. So, yeah, that was just awful. That's awful.
He was, as far as I know, he was a convicted rapist that was released on parole in November 2024, so that was last year. And like I said, the community went absolutely nuts when they heard about this. This occurred in May, and he's been charged with rape, kidnapping, and sexual assault. So that's just an update. And I think in July, the case is going on with that. But this is definitely, there's just so much going on in terms of offenders. This just begs the question, what sort of rehabilitation are these offenders getting? And I'm not only talking about sexual offenders. As we can see with Likhona Fose's case, this man was inside for a long time and he was let out on parole. So I will be looking into that, and maybe in a future episode, Ela, we can talk a bit about what the South African correctional services offer, but not only the South Africans, globally.
Well, we can start with cleaning up our streets and holding our police accountable so they must do their jobs. We can start with cleaning up the child welfare department and having more funding and resources going into that so that we don't have so few social workers employed. They pay to get educated and then you don't even know what they earn as a salary. It's shocking. Our politicians are earning so much money. I don't know what for, honestly. We need to have more of our funds in this country being pumped into the service providers so that they can have a sense of dignity. We need to have more programs for awareness and programs for management and programs for how to deal with different things in these departments. We need to have support. We need to have proper rehabilitation centers and supports for our communities. So little of our country's funds go into the communities where it really matters. Those are the things that need to be cleared up. We need to have programs where these people don't fall through the cracks, the people that are going into the system. We need to have departments that study and educate and research these offenders. What's the psychology? What is, how can these people be rehabilitated, and what are the ways in which to do that? Do we let them back out onto the street? Who do we let back out onto the street? We need to have our communities not reeling, struggling to survive. So that they're struggling to survive. Often you do have a single mother that's at work, and you're trusting the neighbors to look after the child, and then the neighbors send the child to the shop because or grandparents who are old now who still think they're living in those days where it was a little bit safer. Whatever the case may be, we've got communities reeling, struggling to survive from day to day. When you are in that kind of psychological state, making decisions is challenging, navigating what to do, where to go. So many of these communities are trying to manage adults in their households with drug addictions and violence and gang issues. They're dealing with too much. So we have unhealthy communities just trying to survive, trying to raise children. And that's why I'm saying social services, child welfare, that needs to be restructured altogether so that parents understand what their responsibility is and they're held accountable if they don't. It's just too easy to get away with things here. And the vulnerable in these communities are targeted. So there's a lot that needs to change in our system.
Absolutely.
There's so much. And so you and I try and do our little bit, and that's why we've got the course in recovery, so we can spread awareness. And because all I can do is control my home, I can't change the world.
Yeah,
I cannot start here with you.
Yeah,
that's all I can do.
It starts with you and your immediate family. And you guys, if you would like some extra support, because like Elif said, to the current, when you are living in survival mode, when you've got those financial pressures, and it's different for every household, it can be very overwhelming to focus on healing. But we do have a course in recovery, and you can check us out on Patreon, which has a great starting point. We take you through all of the lessons so that you can start this healing journey and teach those that your future generations how to, have healthy habits. Like Elif said, there's so much that we need to be doing in our communities, and it all starts at home. I think my dad used to say charity begins at home, and I believe in that. And we've got another saying, "Fee for your idea." So first, see that your own home is taken care of, and that begins with yourself, your journey, and your relationship with self. So if you're interested, guys, we're going to be putting up that link. Thank you so much for joining us today here for this discussion, and we will see you next time. Over to you, Ella.
Yes, thank you guys for being here. These topics can be very challenging. They can be controversial. And the aim is not to point fingers or to give blame, The aim is to understand that with freedom comes great responsibility. If you want to be free in your world and in your life, you've got to be accountable. You've got to be willing to acknowledge your share. We've got to be willing to be honest with ourselves so that we can begin to change our realities. We can't give up hope and just accept that the world is getting worse and worse and that this is just the direction we're going in. So having these hard conversations and being willing to be challenged, and you can challenge us in the comments. We're here to learn too and to grow as well, is what we need to do to affect change. So we thank you for being here with us once again, where we have spoken about these stories that deserve to be heard and hopefully shed some light and given you an opportunity to think about something that you've not thought about before. Be safe. Take care of yourself. You are important, and you are more powerful than you think in your spaces. So we look forward to seeing you again next time with another episode here on Healed, where we are building a community, a new community that centers recovery for a healthy society together.
Bye, guys.